Now, there is a modicum of stability in the Gulf today, and it's largely so because of a general level of security, with some notable exceptions. And that security is underwritten by the diplomatic, military, and economic power, both of regional states and extra-regional ones. In the latter category, the U.S. clearly stands out, whereas in the former, Saudi Arabia and the UAE come to mind. And as this group knows only so well, its security principally against today's existing capabilities and persistent threats from Iran. When one factors in the game-changing pursuit of nuclear weapons by Iran and the means to employ them within and beyond the region, the stakes are clearly raised. It is this gathering storm sense, some might suggest it has already gathered, others might suggest it's already raining, that may have created the imperative for a U.S. defense umbrella over the region introduced by Secretary Clinton last summer. There are certainly other concerns there, not the least of which is violent extremism, but there's no doubting that Mrs. Clinton had her sights on Iran when she spoke. Now, as some have noted, the term defense umbrella implies a near treaty commitment of mutual military aid to any country attacked or under imminent threat of attack. The Secretary did not use the phrase nuclear defense umbrella, but nonetheless she advanced both the level and seriousness of U.S. commitment, for now stopping short of what has been promised to NATO, Japan, South Korea, and Australia. It's worth noting that this initiative is the latest in a generally consistent expression of interest in the area going back through many administrations. The continuous presence in the Gulf for nearly 60 years of U.S. Navy forces is illustrative of this, as was our vigorous response to the invasion of Kuwait. I'm not diminishing the significance of the recent proposal, but rather highlighting its place in a broad continuum. For instance, in the previous administration, the latter part of the previous administration, the Gulf Security Dialogue was an important step. As Ellen pointed out, beyond politics, one of the inescapable facts of the Gulf is its essentiality to the global economic engine, literally providing a huge percentage of the oil and gas that fire that engine. And while there are compelling reasons beyond energy to be involved there, especially post-September 11th, sitting atop 40% or more of the Earth's proven oil and gas reserves is a compelling one. Likewise, having an equal percentage of the world's maritime transported oil having to pass through the Strait of Hormuz only emphasizes the point. With that background, how any sort of defense umbrella or defense architecture plays out on the ground, as it were, will be important. And if I may abuse the umbrella analogy, it achieves its objective best when the handle, the central shaft, the ribs, the stretchers, and canopy are all working in harmony. In our discussion today, such architecture is easy to conceive, but actually putting all the pieces together in play effectively in the real world is another matter. I'll come back to this in a moment, but let me offer 3 tests as to the feasibility, suitability, and acceptability of any workable defense arrangement in the Gulf, or for that matter, just about any place. First, it cannot be a U.S. effort alone, or even an American, British, and French plan to pick 3 of the most prominent external military actors. Nor, for that matter, can it be a military-only approach. Second, it must recognize the full spectrum of challenges in the region as a whole, and not just the immediate Gulf area. And lastly, we need to be realistic about where the Gulf countries are in their political evolution, the limits of mutual or collective security agreements among these nations, and the current military capability and capacity of the key 6 to 8 countries of interest. In sum, the U.S. military and diplomatic engagement needs to be broad-gauged and long-term. Basically, it's about partnership, persistence, and patience. The U.S. needs to step up to its indispensable leadership role, providing that core structural support, even as we rightfully expect partner countries to shoulder an increasing share of the burden over time. Let me shift to what I believe needs to be done by discussing how this was and largely still is being approached by U.S. military forces in the region. I will focus on military in the main, but relevant commanders actively and regularly reach out to our ambassadors, country teams, State Department, other partners, so that our diplomats know what the military is attempting to do, why they're doing it, and when able, when. If you will allow, I'll use my own experience because it may be illustrative of both the opportunities and challenges of bringing any sort of collaborative structure together. In the naval forces, we had 3 broad lines of operations that our analysis showed needed to be accomplished more or less simultaneously. First, the Fifth Fleet was actively involved in the struggle against violent extremism through combat operations and other support operations throughout the region, principally Iraq, Afghanistan, but as I said, throughout the region. This tended to be U.S.-centric, although at times our air combat operations supported NATO and Afghanistan and other friendly forces. Also in this line of operation, we bend the need to safeguard U.S. and other designated forces and entities through force protection activities. We help the local navies in building their own capacity since they face the same enemy. Thus, force protection training was regularly provided to the conventional maritime forces of these nations, and we were able to see some improvement over time, demonstrable improvement over time. There's obviously a deterrent or dissuasive benefit to having and being seen as having a credible military capability, and this is relevant in any sort of structure we might seek to create. It has to be real, it has to be present, and it has to be credible. But force protection, while important, is not all that sophisticated, in many respects revealed just how far our partners have yet to travel. Second, we worked very hard at underpinning maritime security throughout the region. This was done principally by the combined maritime forces, or as I used to say, the other 2.5 million square miles of our area. That combined maritime force comprised of over 22 nations had as their mission to deny the use of the seas for terror or the facilitation of terror, as might be the case through narco trade. Importantly, 5 local navies had formally joined the coalition, and all the navies and many of the Coast Guards cooperated with it. The area of maritime security, including its sub-element of maritime infrastructure protection, was where most of our capacity building with local navies and Coast Guards took place, and was one of 2 specific areas that Secretary Gates asked us to focus on. While more complex than force protection, especially in command and control and intelligence integration, maritime security operations are not overly difficult, especially for mature navies. And interestingly, while the GCC navies conducted exercises and had the means to coordinate among themselves, my impression was that they were more engaged working bilaterally with the U.S. Fifth Fleet or within the coalition construct than they were with each other. I believe this is an important takeaway. The reasons are many, and they frequently appeared political to me, but as we go forward, we need to recognize a certain level of inertia exists, and we're just going to have to be persistent and patient. Third, we recognize the need for an active deterrent posture with respect to Iran, both through fleet-only activities and by teaming with the U.S. Air Force and Gulf nations in an air and missile defense effort. This was the other principal initiative from Secretary Gates. From a command and control point of view, we made considerable progress demonstrating the ability to link sensors, weapons, and other components together, essentially Gulf-wide, ashore, afloat, and in the air. All the GCC countries have air forces of various size and development, but like the Maritime Coalition, this grouping could not have been built on its own without the irreplaceable U.S. Air Force leadership. I should point out, as one of these technical things military people like to point out, interoperability was an issue even though most of these systems were U.S. or European derivative. The devil, as in many things, is in the details.